Hi, everyone. My name is Elsa. Thank you for kind of joining in or watching how to learn to vermicomposting with me. I have my phone here real quick, so that way I won't go off target tangent with the little time that I do have. But I just want to make sure that you guys are able to have the information that's needed to start your own vermicomposting. I'll just keep this nice and simple and really easy, and hopefully you'll become a your own vermicomposter person. So my name is Elsa again. I have my master's at Tuskegee University in plant and soil science. And right now I'm actually taking PhD courses at the University of California, Santa Cruz at or for environmental science. My thesis actually focused on vermicomposting, so I have some background information that I am willing to share today. It was a really interesting process. And basically for that thesis, I researched on the nutritional content and for post-harvest, along with the soil quality after you actually implement vermicomposting to your plants. I had 3 species: radish, tomatoes, and leafy greens. But I won't get too much into that. So let's get started. Before you start your vermicomposting, I think it's really good for you to become familiar with the different types of compost that we have or that are available. That way you can see which one is best for you. The first one would be outdoor cold composting. It's also known as passive composting. You really don't need to do so much. If you have like a piece of land, just throw in your trees, leaves, hay, any type of soil, let it do its own thing. It'll take about a year for you to actually get results, but you don't really have to do anything. The microorganisms do their own thing as long as the temperatures remain below 115 degrees. The next one, real quick, is outdoor hot composting. It's more hands-on. Stephen actually has a good example, a model of hot composting right here in Gardopia. If you actually have volunteered here in the past, most likely you have the experience of turning it and fluffing it. That is required to actually maintain the balance for your compost. You need to also monitor your carbon and your nitrogen ratio. The temperatures really range from 130 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's pretty hot. So as you're turning it, if you see like fumes or some type of heat coming out from that, that's a good sign. That means that the bacteria is actually doing their work. Because of the heat, just a note to self, it's good for you to know that it actually kills pathogens, weed seeds, and it kind of like breaks down, and you'll get your complete compost to harvest within 90 days. Now, what we all are here for is the vermicompost. Vermicompost, the word vermi actually stands for worm. So worm and composting, right? So what is vermicomposting? Basically, it's a product of earthworm digestion and aerobic decomposition using the activities of microorganisms. On top of that, you can also call it a worm casting. It produces a rich organic soil amendment containing a diversity of plant nutrients, well, nutrients for your plants with very beneficial microorganisms. All right, so some of the benefits, basically, if you have kitchen scraps, veggie scraps, peeled tomatoes or whatever the case is, instead of throwing it out into the garbage and having it go to a landfill, you can just take that, give it to your worms, and they'll make resource out of what you give it. So kind of beneficial there, and it also makes you feel good about that. I myself have not been vermicomposting lately, but I was something else try to start to do soon, so I couldn't feel like a hypocrite. But anyway, let's go on. Now, location. So you're ready to start. You could either grow it inside or you can actually have it outside. If you maintain it inside, it is a lot easier, but there are certain factors you would have to like research if you do plan to have your own vermicomposter outside, because guess what? In your house or in your apartment, you're able to control the temperature. It won't rain. And outside, there are a lot of external factors that you might not be ready for. So I'd suggest for you to actually Google some of those things. All right. If we still have some time, I could probably give you a few tidbits. Okay. But let's keep it rolling. So now you want to choose a worm factory. Here we actually have a few selections. If you have a couple of buckets, just make some holes. You can use, I'll do a quick demonstration. This one's a little sturdy, but there's like 2 buckets in here. The worms actually will migrate to the top, but you can use that. Or I use this for my thesis. This is called a worm factory. You could even order it online or on Amazon, and there's different layers. So the worms also do migrate, But I would suggest for you to kind of like look into the harvest. It's a whole ritual that you have to do. But once you get the hang of it, it becomes very easy. Or you have a couple of these laying around the house, just make some holes and you have your own vermicomposter. Pretty easy. And if you feel kind of crafty, you can actually make one out of wood. I don't know if there's worms in there, but we'll pretend that these are filled with worms, all right? Just for the sake of it. Okay, so again, you can just order it online if you don't really want to do anything too crafty, or just make one of your own for free. All right. If you are asking like where can you get your worms, you can actually get them at Petland or a store that actually sells fish bait, or you can order it on Amazon online. That's fine. All right. So before we go into how to add your worms, let's just focus on the worm bed. So before you actually get your worms, at least prepare the worm bed first. Like that way the worms don't have an empty nest, but prepare your soil. Some people could actually add hormone powder. Some people also add coor, which is really good for like, I don't know, something about the protein in the soil. A lot of people do recommend it. I was able to use it for my thesis. And then just make sure the moisture level is pretty good. You can even get a temperature to monitor the temperature of the worm bed. And just make sure it's not too dry. Make sure it's not too, you don't want it like mud either. So once you've prepared your soil bed, get some regular garden bed soil. You can mix it with a little bit of compost, add additional hormones if you want, and then you should be fine. Now you have your worms. When it comes to actually getting your worms, sometimes they might be a little bit too stressed out. They will form into a ball. Do not try to like untangle them. That's their way of like being stressed out and adjusting into their new location. All right. Okay. The type of worms that you actually can get, there's African night crawlers, European night crawlers, and red wigglers. I would recommend for you to use the red wigglers. They're a little bit more adaptable, and they actually do really well between 55 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. Red wigglers, they require similar conditions as humans for growth. Make sure they have a very well environment. And the worm bed is actually controlled through nutrient and food availability and space requirements. So when it comes to ways of feeding, I just go by a 1-to-1 ratio. So for example, like you have your carbon base and your nitrogen base. Your carbon base is brown and your nitrogen base could be green. I'll get into that. So your carbon base is like cardboard, newsletter, paper. If you get like mail at home and you want to throw it out, you can just actually cut up in pieces and feed that to your worms. Your nitrogen base or greens are anything that's organic, your vegetables, your fruits, right? Your coffee grounds, right? So with that, have a handful of your browns, have a handful of your greens, and just put it in the corner or along the sides of your worm factory, 1-to-1 ratio, even amount, right, of your brown and green. Some people actually get it make a smoothie. So I would recommend get like a separate blender to just blend all of the fruit scraps, banana peels, whatever the case that works for you, blend it, and then you can pour it over as a smoothie. That way, the material can actually break down quicker. Another thing that people actually do sometimes, they take fruit scraps and they put in a plastic bag and they place it in the fridge. You can do that, and then eventually you can just, lay it down on your worm bed. One thing that I would suggest for you to avoid: salty foods, oils, meat, fish, dairy, citrus, spices. Those can be harmful. But some cool things that you can add is calcium. Calcium egg shells, but just break it down, sprinkle it, and it'll actually increase the calcium content in your worm bed. Leaves is also a plus, but just don't put too much. Now, as you do that daily, in 90 days or 2 to 3 months, you'll be able to actually like harvest. There's a process for harvesting. I do the pyramid scheme. So basically, I'm so thirsty. Thank you. Hey guys, let me take a break because I am parched. Okay. Thanks, Stephen. Good call. So I do the pyramid scheme, in which it's kind of hard for me to do here, but just like You'll know your soil is ready once it's dark and it has that earthy smell. That's like the main important thing you want to look out for. And I would just kind of like push it towards the middle. Push it towards the middle, leave it there for a couple of hours so that way the worms can actually migrate down, and then you can just scoop up. Or if you have like something with mesh, you can do that too. There's so many ways, and you'll develop your own style. All right. So you have your fertilizer, it's filled with macronutrients and micronutrients. It actually will help control plant pathogens, other nematodes and other pests. And it'll help enhance your plant health. So you can use it as a plant, you can use it as an ornament for your ornamental plants, and it'll actually do it really, really good. The last two things that I will touch on, how many minutes do I have left? Okay. Let's say if you have an odor, you have a problem with the smell, just add more carbon-based material. If it's too wet, add more newspaper, cardboard, you know. If it's too dry, add more greens. And the last thing that I will touch on is if you do have an issue with infestation, you can always apply neem oil. Fruit flies is actually a common thing that does occur. So I would just make my own like fruit fly repellent with vinegar. It actually does work. It hasn't given me an issue. And let's say you have enough fertilizer, but you don't know what to do with it. You can put it in your freezer and you can store it to extend its shelf life. But before I go, I just want to add two things. You can do your vermicompost tea and your vermicompost leachate. The leachate is basically the liquid runoff that actually is secreted from the bottom, and you can always just collect that and dilute it with water and use it as a foliar spray. Or your tea bag, basically, you can just grab the fertilizer, put it in a net stocking, place it inside a bucket with water, and in 2 and 3 days, it'll change color. And you can also use that as a liquid drench for your plants. So that's pretty much my segment. Thank you so much for joining me and watching. I hope you were able to learn something out of this. If you have any questions, I'll give my information to Steven. And another thing I'll throw on, we do need more scientists in vermicomposting. So I can also help you with that if you are looking to do some research for your master's. I'd be willing to assist with that. We need more scientists. So thanks and have a good day.